Chapter 10, The Battle of the Bears. Goldilocks, the three bears, the girls, and Moonface all went out of the little cottage. How strange it seemed to see roses blossoming over the walls, when ice and snow lay all around. The thing is, where do we find the polar bears? Said Goldilocks. Over there, towards the sun, said the father bear. Beth and Frannie were surprised to see both the moon and the sun shining in the sky. They followed the father bear, slipping and sliding and holding on to one another. It was very cold, and their noses and toes felt as if they were freezing. Suddenly they saw the little snow house that Joe had built for the magic snowman. Look, said the father bear, we'd better make for that. But before they got there, a big white figure squeezed itself out of the snow house and saw them. It was the magic snowman. As soon as he saw the three bears and the others, he began to shout loudly in a windy, snowy voice. Enemies! Enemies! Hey bears, come and send off the enemies! We're not enemies, yelled Moonface, and Goldilocks ran forwards to show the snowman that she was a little girl. But Moonface pulled her back. He didn't trust the old snowman. The snowman bent his big, fat body down and picked up the great handful of snow. He threw one at Goldilocks. She ducked down, and it passed over her head, but hit Baby Bear. Ouch, he said, and sat down in a hurry. Then everything at once happened. Poor Goldilocks. A crowd of white polar bears hurried out of their underground home to help the snowman, and soon the air was full of flying snowballs. The snow was hard, and the balls hurt if they hit anyone. It wasn't a bit good. The girls shouting that they were friends, not enemies. Nobody heard them, and soon there was a fierce battle going on. Oh dear, gasped Beth, trying her best to throw straight. This is dreadful. We shall never rescue Joe by behaving like this. But there really didn't seem anything else that could be done. After all, if people were fighting at you, you can't do much but defend yourself. And the three bears and the girls and Moonface felt very angry at having had snowballs thrown at them. Smack, thud, biff, squish. The snowballs burst as they hit, and soon there was a great noise of angry oomphs from the white bears, and ooches from the three bears, and yells from the children, and screeches from Moonface, who acted as if he was mad, hopping about and yelling and kicking up the snow as well as throwing it. His big brown face was a fine target for snowballs, and he was hit more than anyone else. Poor Moonface. Now, whilst this fierce battle was going on, where do you suppose Joe was? As soon as he heard the cry of enemies, enemies, he had hidden in the corner, for he didn't want to be mixed up in any fight. And when he saw the white bears going out, and he was left all alone, he began at once to think of escaping. He crept to the hole that had led above ground. The battle was some way off, so Joe did not see that the enemies were really his own friends. If he'd had, he would have gone to join them at once. What a terrible noise they're all making, he thought. It sounds like a battle between gorillas and bears to me. I'm not going near them. I'll be eaten up or something. I shall just run hard to the opposite way and hope I'll meet someone to help me. So Joe, dressed up in a big white woolly coat and looking just like a little white bear himself, crept off over the ice and snow, not seen by anyone. He ran as soon as he thought he was out of sight. He ran and he ran and he ran, but he met nobody. Not a soul was to be seen. Only a lonely seal lay on a shelf of ice, but in he dived below as soon as he saw Joe. And then Joe stopped in the greatest astonishment as he stared as if his eyes would fall out of his head. He had come to the cottage of the three bears, standing all alone in the middle of the ice and snow, and, of course, its roses were still blooming round it, scent in the air. I'm dreaming, said Joe. I simply must be dreaming. A cottage with roses here in the middle of the snow? Well, I shall go and see who lives there. Perhaps they would give me something to eat and let me rest, for I'm very hungry and tired. He knocked on the door. There was no answer. He opened the door and went in. How he stared! There was no one in to be seen at all, but on the table stood 3 bowls of steaming porridge, one big, one middle-sized, and one small. It was rather dark, so Joe lighted a big candle on the table. He sat back into the biggest chair, but it was far too big, and he got up again. He sat down on the next size chair, but that was far too piled up with cushions, and he got up and sat on the smallest chair. This was just right, and Joe settled down comfortably. But alas, his weight was far too much for it, and the chair broke to bits beneath him. He looked at the delicious porridge. He tasted the porridge in the biggest bowl. Far too hot, and he burnt his tongue. He tasted the next bowl, but that was far too sweet. But then he tasted the porridge in the little bowl. That, as you can guess, was just right. So Joe ate it all up. Then he felt so sleepy that he thought he really must rest. So he went into the bedroom and lay down on the biggest bed. But it was far too big, so he tried the middle-sized one. that was too soft, and he went down into the middle one. So Joe lay down on the cot, and that was too small and warm and comfortable that he fell fast asleep. All this time the snow battle was still going on. The snowman was so big and the polar bears were so fierce that very soon the three bears, the children and Moonface were driven backwards. Then a snowstorm blew up and the snow fell so thickly that it was quite impossible to see anything. Moonface called out in alarm, "Bears! Goldilocks! Beth! Frannie! Take hold of each other! Hold hands at once and don't let go! One of us might easily be lost in this storm." Everyone at once took hands. The snow blew in their faces and they could see nothing. Bending forwards, they began to walk very carefully away from the white bears, who had stopped fighting now and were trying to find out where their enemies were. "Don't shout or anything," said Moonface. "We don't want the white bears to hear us, just in case they take us prisoners. They might not listen to the three bears. Move off and we'll look for some sort of shelter till this storm's over." They were all very miserable. They were cold, rather frightened and quite lost. They stumbled over the snow, keeping hold of one another's hands firmly. They went on, and suddenly Goldilocks shook off Moonface's hand and pointed in front of him. "A light!" she said in astonishment. Everyone stopped. I say, it's our cottage!" shrieked the baby bear, in surprise and delight. "But who's inside?" "Someone must have lit a candle." They all stared at the lighted snowman window. Who was inside our cottage? Could the magic snowman have found it? Or the polar bears? Was it an enemy inside, or a friend? Whee! Blew the wind, and the snowflakes fell thickly on everyone as they stood still, wondering. "Ooh," shivered Moonface, "we shall get dreadful cold standing out here in the snow. Let's go in and find out who's there." So the father bear opened the door, and one by one they all trooped in, looking round the empty room, half afraid. Chapter 11. More and more surprises. "There doesn't seem to be anyone here," said Beth, cautiously looking round. "Well, who lit the candle?" said Moonface, his big round face looking anxious. "We didn't leave it burning." Suddenly the father bear gave an angry growl and pointed to his chair. "Who's been sitting in my chair?" he said. "And who's been sitting in my chair?" said Mother Bear, pointing to hers. "And who's been sitting on my chair and broken it all to bits?" squeaked Baby Bear. They all rinsed in tears. Beth giggled. "That sounds like the story of the three bears coming true," she said to Frannie. "They'll talk about porridge next." And guess what they did? "Who's been eating my porridge?" said Father Bear angrily. "And who's been eating my porridge?" said Mother Bear. "And who's been eating mine and gobbled it all up?" wept Baby Bear, scraping his spoon round the empty plate. "It's all very mysterious," said Moonface. "Somebody lit the candle, somebody sat on the chairs, somebody ate the porridge, but who?" "Well, it's not me this time," said Goldilocks. "I was with you all the time. We were snowballing, wasn't we, bears?" "You certainly were," growled Father Bear softly, patting the little girl on the back. He was very fond of her. "I wish we'd found poor Joe," said Beth. "Whatever will he be doing in this horrid cold land?" "Do you suppose we ought to go out and look for him again?" said Frannie, shivering at the thought of the ice and wind outside. "No," said Moonface decidedly. "No one is going out of this cottage again until we're safely in the wood at home. I'm afraid we can't possibly rescue Joe now." "What's that noise?" said Goldilocks suddenly. Everyone listened. Someone was snoring softly in the next room. "We never thought of looking there," said Moonface. "Who can it be?" "Shh!" said Goldilocks. "If we can catch him asleep, we can hold him tight and he won't be able to get away. But if he wakes up, he might be fierce." They tiptoed to the door of the bedroom. One by one they squeezed through. "Who's been lying in my bed?" said Father Bear, in a growly voice. "Shh!" said Moonface crossly. "Who's been lying on my bed?" said Mother Bear. "Shh!" said everyone. "And who's been lying on my bed and is fast asleep there still?" said the Baby Bear. Everyone stared at the cot. Yes, there was someone there. Someone covered in white. Was it a polar bear? "It's a white bear," said Moonface, half frightened. "Let's lock him in before he wakes," said Father Bear. "He might think we are the enemies." They all rushed out of the little room and slammed the door shut with a loud thud, knocking it behind them. "He's caught," said Moonface joyfully. Joe woke up with a jump. Who had locked him in? Had the magic snowman caught him again? He began to shout and bang on the door, and then Beth and Frannie recognised his voice and yelled out loudly, "Moonface, it's Joe! It's Joe!" They rushed to the door, unlocked it, and flung their own arms round Joe. The boy was too astonished to speak. He hugged his sisters. "How did you get here?" he asked. "How did you get here?" cried Beth and Frannie. "Come into the kitchen, we'll all have some hot porridge and milk," said Goldilocks. "We can talk then and get warm." So Joe went with the others, and they all chattering loudly about everything. Goldilocks ladled out porridge into the blue bowls and made some hot chocolate. Soon everyone was putting sugar on porridge and drinking the hot chocolate. Joe poured some milk over his porridge and smiled joyfully at everybody. "What an adventure it's been! Shall I tell my tale first, or will you tell yours?" He told his, and then Beth told how Moonface had gone to the 3 bears for their help, and all about the fierce snow battle. "It's a pity about the battle," said Father Bear mournfully. "The white bears are cousins of ours, and have always been quite friendly. Now they seem to be enemies." "Well, let's hope they don't discover our cottage," said Goldilocks, eating her hot porridge. Moonface had we'd better make some more porridge and get back to the wood. Plenty time," said Moonface, pouring himself another cup of hot chocolate. But you know, there wasn't plenty of time, for just at that moment Goldilocks gave a scream and pointed to the window. "Someone looked in," she said. "Don't be silly," said Moonface. "I'm not," said Goldilocks. "I'll tell you, somebody looked in." "Who could it be?" "The handle of the door is moving," yelled Moonface, and he leapt back from the door. In a flash he had locked it and bolted it. The Father Bear got up and went to the window. He looked into the snowstorm. "I can't see anything," he said. "Oh, yes, I can. I can see the white bears. They have surrounded our cottage. Now what do we do?" "Well, they can't get in at the door, and they certainly can't get in at the window," said Moonface, looking fierce. The door shook, but it held well. Someone had battered on it. "We shan't let you in," yelled Joe. "If anyone tries to open the window or break it, I'll throw this kettle at them," shouted Moonface, who was dancing about, waving the kettle in the air. "Moonface, that kettle's got hot water in it," said Frannie. "Do be careful. You nearly dropped some on me." "I'll drop it on any bear that dares to come in here," yelled Moonface, splattering the room with steaming drops. "Oh dear," said Beth. "Hide behind the bed, Frannie. It seems to me that Moonface is almost as dangerous as the bears." Moonface soon realised that he was right, and that waving the hot kettle around was a foolish and dangerous thing to do, so he put it down again gently. Then the Father Bear had an idea, and dragged the big table across the room to block the door. Things were getting excited. Joe and the girls were frightened, but they couldn't help feeling terribly thrilled too. Whatever was going to happen next? "Oomph, oomph," boomed the big bears outside, but they couldn't get in at the door or window. But they found another way. The chimney was wide enough and big, for the fireplace was one of those large, old-fashioned kind and needed a wide chimney. One of the bears climbed up onto the top of the roof, followed by 3 more. The first one slipped into the big chimney. Down he went, whoosh! Down went another, and the third one, and the fourth. They landed with a crash on the big hearth and hurriedly jumped away from the flames of the fire. "Surrender!" they cried, as the startled children and bears. "Surrender! The magic snowman is outside. Let him in!" What's going to happen next? I'll leave it, and we'll find out next time.